That's the thing, is in our Western minds, we stop because we get information and we think we understand. And so understanding stops the process, but we don't know anything in our bodies yet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think a lot of people like get stuck, because the allopathic airway dental model is so linear, so logical. It's very appealing to the Western dualistic dichotomized mind.
Mm-hmm.
That you're like, of course that's the answer. But I'm like, what about connectedness? And what about homeostasis? And what about the body's ability and the fact that you are still, spinning and expressing and the geometry?
Welcome back to the Village Sessions podcast.
Bringing wisdom home.
We wanted to kick things off with talking about, just from our hearts and just resonance for this episode, talk about literally our probably top 3 favorite products of all time. That all of us
all three of us have all the time when we can get it shipped here.
The Village Sessions Hall of Fame.
Yes, like this is like holy grail.
How many times have you referred people to it? Like, that's a real question. Is
Countless.
Exactly.
Countless.
It's like the link that I have, my phone has memorized. Because
Yes.
I'm just sending. I'm like, yeah, you should do this.
Completely. It's called the Master Mineral Drink. I actually really like that they have the word master in there. Maybe that's like an element of why it feels so holy grail. But this
like
is
a
from,
trophy in your hand.
It actually is. And I like it's just great all around. Nick.
She's gonna hug it now.
Nick and Nathan, they're brothers. They created this company called Mitigate Stress, and they have put out actually a whole line of products. We talk about their bath formula in Rooted Families. The bath formula is a mineral formula that you can put into your kid's bath. They make shilajit. They make liquid shilajit. You could just like squirt right into your drink. This is the one that people usually like buy in a stock of 5 to 7 and put in their pantry.
If they restock every Thursday, right?
I thought you were saying you purchase every Thursday.
Oh no, if you're familiar with this product at all, you know it goes out of stock.
Yes, it does.
And you're like, aha, and you wait till Thursday.
Yes, it does. That's right. That's right. So yeah, this would be probably one of my favorite ways to get magnesium in, and it's with the concentration and ratios that they add potassium and sodium with the magnesium.
Very important.
Super important. She loves talking about minerals. We love talking about minerals. And yeah, we were just like, why don't we just share our favorite product for this episode? No sponsor, just like straight up sharing.
This was a staple in when you guys were in my postpartum, immediate postpartum.
Oh, yeah.
We were like instead of having an IV or something else, I had a lot of blood loss, and it was like, oh, she has master minerals. We'll just jog.
Yeah.
Eat this, drink this, but drink more of this.
Yes. That reminds me, and probably the reason that we grabbed it is because so many women in my freely rooted space, if they were experiencing any kind of like extended postpartum bleeding, they would be like, wait, when is the last time I like was on it with my minerals? Maybe it was like baby number 3 or 4, and they're just like taking care of other kids. Literally, this supplement specifically, they took a little bit of it, and then the bleeding completed, basically ceased. Incredible. And so, yeah, that must have been something that we brought through.
Unconscious.
Yeah, yeah. Perfect. Anyways, we do have a code for you guys, and it's Village, and you can go in the description box to find the link straight to their website. But we wanted to share that with you guys. We'd like to put it in our adrenal cocktails, and we are all fueled up and ready to get into the biggest. What are we calling it? The biggest picture of
lip and tongue tie.
Lip and tongue tie.
Part 2.
Let's do it, guys.
So we're going to get right into it. This is the biggest picture of lip and tongue tie, and we set the framework in the context for this entire piece last episode. So if you haven't listened to the last episode, go back, get the context, get the framework. We laid out some of the history. We highlighted nutrition as a a big piece and component of this, and then laid out the other parts of the story as well. I think it's interesting. Was it a year and a half ago that you guys did?
Oh, come on.
It was even more. It was even
Closer than
earlier.
2
It
years
was
ago?
We're getting
story
close to
is
3.
almost 3.5, and it
No
was
way.
it was she was an infant when we
Yeah.
did that episode.
I'm saying
Okay.
it's close to 3 years.
So
Yeah.
on the Freely Rooted podcast, you guys did an episode called The Big Picture of Lip and Tongue Tie,
Yep.
which still to this day is one of the most shared episodes on tongue tie that I have come across, and continually is like sent to me or referenced, etc. And so I'm just curious. I would love for like one of you guys maybe to kickstart this on what has happened since. There's a ton of stuff that's happened between you guys, like rooted families, all the things. In a synopsis, what has happened with the people that have come into contact with that information and the way that you share wisdom in that podcast, and yeah, maybe where we're headed.
I mean, even my own personal experience getting to apply even the things that Michelle brought into the episode, I myself had an experience with deeper and deeper and deeper from that point on. We hadn't even started working with you as a couple, and
Oh my gosh.
but
We're
yeah,
going
we hadn't
back.
even done
Okay.
couples container yet at that point.
Wow.
So there were pieces that she brought into that episode where I knew that a seed was planted, even, and it's always like that. It's never just for the audience, it's for yourself too. So even getting my own family ecology online after that episode was like one of the biggest transformations
It was a
I've
pivot
ever
point.
had. So yeah, it was a big moment. And I know a lot of people have had an experience, you know, with that episode as well, and then have come into your field, have worked with you, have mentored with you, even just following along with you, being like, what? This girl is,
What is
she,
she
what is
talking
she? What?
What is that? Or we always get I don't know what that, like, I don't understand.
mean?
What does it
What
mean?
words are you saying? I don't know what you're saying.
Yes. The language
The
is
language
like,
piece.
yeah. And so maybe they don't understand it and they don't come back to it, but quite more often people come back.
And they stay around.
Yeah, they get curious. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love for you to kick it off on maybe where it's headed and set the context for craniofacial growth and development.
Yeah, so last episode we talked about Weston A. Price's work in nutrition and physical generation, and we talked about nutrition specifically to decay, his work connecting nutrition and decay, and also what he was noticing craniofacially, the narrow faces, the mouth breathing, things like that. And he was right around the beginning of World War I. So we also know that moving forward, the beginnings of orthodontia was also about that time too. So it was, you know, that experimentation, let's just
Interesting.
say,
Yeah.
let's just call it what it is, actually
ongoing.
started at about that time too. And then we would see research related to primates, plugging noses in primates and creating mouth breathing and looking at their faces and bone changes and things like that. And then not too long after that, we would see, and this is not talked about, we would see the kind of the fathers of craniofacial growth and development, the orthodontists who were actually looking at tracking from infancy up the way the head and the neck and the face developed. And what's so fascinating to me is that the biggest takeaway I get from that work is there's actually a rotational unwinding in a literal sacred geometric fashion that happens in the growth and development. And it's almost like a movie where they talk about this one thing and then they cut to this and there's like no continuity.
Drop it out.
Whoop, that's it. We see that. Okay, and this is how we fix it.
Wow.
You know, and there's no like bringing it all together.
Not yet.
Which drives me crazy, of course, as an investigator, experimenter, you know, who's like, wait a minute. That's, you know, kind of hypocritical to say that there's this thing that's happening and there's no like pulling it through, as I call it, all the way through, right? So it's this, and then we do it, and then we fix it this way. Same things happen in the lip and tongue tie world. there's this thing, and if we do this thing, then we get this result. And then all of a sudden we've got causative instead of correlative, right? Which is not, it's not true. It's just not true. It's, yes, sometimes we see it, and yet is that the whole story? So my question
break down what you mean by that.
is the whole story. So for example, like the whole diagnostic world of lip and tongue tie has now become, this is how you diagnose this is what it is, this is what it causes, and if you don't fix it, you're going to get this. So it's all fear-based, future-paced. It's never about like, well, in the realm of all people, is this true? And fortunately, I attract enough anomalies and exception generators to be able to say, oh, it's really not the case in everything, right? So in the progression of craniofacial growth and development literature, there is a duality, there's a dichotomy that's created behind what we see and what we do. They're not connected, right? So the allopathic dental system took the what we do and didn't connect it back to the how we got there or how it actually unfolds and happens.
Yes.
Right. And so we saw this, we talked about this in relationship to the nutrition piece. And I referenced you as a modern woman who is doing these things, who is teaching people how to look at body responses in motion, in real time, and making adjustments, not sticking to a program, but actually utilizing the information in reference to their ecology to get the maximum benefit.
Totally.
That is the cutting edge. That's a leading edge of how you take the way something works and what you do with it or about it, right? And just for a little reference, my craniofacial growth and development journey started when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, where they took the two middle teeth and put brackets on them to pull it together because I had blocked out canines. So I was classically that child. But what we don't really know, I mean, you could say, yeah, well, developmentally, she's got this kind of phenotypic expression and the genetics are blah, blah, blah. But no one except me knows my history between 0 and 7, right?
Totally.
The things that happen in very foundational years that actually would lead to a craniofacial expression such as that, right?
Totally.
And then fortunately, we're not able to afford orthodontics when my friends were going through braces, right?
Wow.
So I was late getting braces at 15.
Whoa.
I was late. I was one of the few people my age that were actually in braces at that age.
Now braces are 8 years old, 9 years old, 10
Yeah,
years old.
8's too late, they call it. Yeah.
So interesting.
And I had headgear. So I was called class 2, overjet, pulled it back, right? I think the only thing that saved me at that time was I was a flute player.
Oh, wow.
So that was my myofunctional therapy.
I was going to say the tongue, the
Yes.
exhalation.
Right. So that was my myofunctional therapy. And then, of course, however many years later, I would end up with TMD symptoms, right? And begin a pathway into the appliance, like a night appliance. And then many years later, it would be the migraine situation, right? And then I completely jumped down the rabbit hole of becoming a myofunctional therapist, the whole airway paradigm. I was its bigger supporter, rah, rah, rah. Space is the answer because Weston A. Price saw all these beautiful, wide, jaw expressions and palate expressions. So that must be health, right? And then expandedonics, as it's called by some of the creators now that are beginning to actually pull back from that narrative, is like, maybe not everybody's made to have a 42 millimeter palate.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Interesting thought.
I'm curious, And what I discovered by watching children go through this process is that I could almost predict who was going to be well regulated in that and who was not, just by like what they were bringing to the table as far as like vitality and family dynamics and other things, right? That were like their nutritional status and a bunch of other little markers. And I'm like, I could almost tell like, oh, this kid's going to be fine. They're going to develop homeostasis and they're going to regulate once they're out of treatment. And then others that were not. It was pretty obvious. And then from there, you know, my own journey with the having a posterior tongue tie release done, and then 2 weeks later ending up at the hospital for, 11 days and a collapsed lung, sepsis, all of that. Body goes completely offline. Really gave me pause to consider the resources that are necessary to be able to bring a person through that kind of treatment. It's a lot.
Totally.
And for some people, it's too much. And I think that's what some of the founding fathers in the orthodontic movement are finding now, is that maybe it's not about a 42 millimeter palate. And some of the more refined practitioners that practice at a very high level, who have been doing this for a really long time, are now like, wow, when other people, other doctors do this treatment, now I'm getting people who are just jammed and stuck and sick, and they've got other issues now. So the answer was not that they needed more space.
Totally.
And that's pretty profound, because now we've peaked and we're coming down the other side of, if you want to call it the golden solution to the airway problems. This took me to the philosophy that the energetic system that created the airway, the palatal width, the palatal shape, the rotations of the teeth, even the anatomy along the midline, the energetic system that was present from the beginning is what created that. We could go in and change that, but the energetic system is still the same and probably unable to support those changes. So we get way out of capacity here if we do not improve this. All of that led me to consider, like, okay, well, what did these folks have with the beautiful shape and the healthy teeth and all that? And I began to look at, go into and look at some of these cultures, not just what they were eating, but how they were together as people. These folks were barefooted on the ground in the sun. They were living together in community. They were dancing together. They were chanting together. They were in front of the fires together at night. They were living in huts together. There was a unity and community there that actually became the field in which their shape took place. And they looked like each other.
Yeah.
They knew who they were, where they were, why they were here.
The purpose was online.
The purpose was online.
And there wasn't alteration to the physical shape or frame in any other way.
Yeah.
Besides the natural.
And, in the consciousness literature, we actually have evidence of those type energetics now, that it's what happens between us that is very indicative of how our physical bodies and our ways will go. We know about the effect of, what's the meme where it says, hang out with 5 smokers, you'll be the 6th. Hang out with 5 so-and-sos, you'll be the 6th. You'll be the 6th. It's true, because in that field is a center of gravity, and it's either raising or lowering, and whichever direction it goes is honestly how you will look. It's how you will be, because your charge, your negative ions are going to follow that path. It's like, it's a law.
Totally.
You even posted on your stories this morning a post from, I think, was it Rick Rubin? No, Jack Cruz. Jack Cruz. He was like, you become who
And it was
you
the
spend your
rotten
time
orange that the one next to it was getting rotten. And decay, degeneration. If that part of degeneration is near you, then you're going to leach toward it.
Or it requires a heck of a lot more energy to not let that happen. To be the leader, to be the one that sets the center of gravity.
So much. So much. So the family unit is actually the best place to create this energetic field for your child. And you guys know that I'm very big on, if your child has had a lip and tongue tie diagnosis, if your child has had an airway diagnosis, if there's a shaping of the palate there that a doctor might not consider ideal, then that's not just that child's problem. It's the energetic system, the whole ecology that child comes from that gets to participate in that whole process, whatever you choose. Whether you choose to actually go in and outsource to orthodontia to do that, or if you're like, whoa, we're really going to pull back and we're going to expand. We're going to shore up every part of our world and get in touch with who we are and where we are and what we believe in our purpose, and create this strong purpose together that actually begins to show in your child's faces and lives, which both of you have seen.
100%.
Firsthand experience with.
And we talked about this on the mirroring episode as well, about how if we do, take a child's circumstance and make it the problem and then put them in an appliance, fix it. We talked about that on this episode, about how it's actually taking them out of rapport with how the family holds themselves. And so you might think when you hear that, okay, well, let's all get in expanders. let's all change our
No, my favorite one is, here, chew on this piece of plastic.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but that's what we're saying is like, oh, we've all got narrow palates. Yeah. Let's chew on this piece of plastic so we can have a wider whatever, and then craniofacially, blah, 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 blah. But the tone and the lack of competence here along the magnetic midline is not a habit, it's an energetic.
100%.
This is demagnetization, the cranial base, magnetization, all of those places and spaces that literally do not have the energy to stay together is your locus of entry to that system. That's the entry point.
And you have a whole system that you created called the Pyramid of Stability that we licensed, and we teach it in rooted families, or you teach it in rooted families, in which case, let's take an appliance or a piece of plastic or an expander. You have like a mapping system where that makes sense in a family system, if that's an opportunity that you align with.
Yeah.
If it's something in your belief systems, because there's all these other pieces that would need to come online first to actually support it.
Exactly. I also kind of use the analogy of like a third floor bathroom. So you've got a house and you're going to go upstairs and you're going to remodel the third floor bathroom. You're going to take in this closet. You're going to put in a new tub. You're going to, well, you might check and make sure that the flooring can handle that, the joists and all that. But how far down are you going to go? Are you going to check that the plumbing can handle the discharge? Does the plumbing connect with the, how old is the house? How old is the structure? Does the plumbing in the slab connect with the street? Is the roof all in alignment with what's going to happen underneath that? It's not just about the renovations. It's about, can the whole system hold it, contain it, run it, maintain fund it, everything, and I'll say, if ever, is that taken into consideration when we go in and override the energetic system that created that anatomy in the first place, hoping to give it health. But honestly, in a lot of cases, especially now, in the last, I would say 5 years or so, we're seeing that action cost more energy from the system than it actually gives them in functionality to breathe better. Now, your expandedonists, are gonna die on the hill of, we need more space for the airway, because that's how people breathe. But that energetic system created what they could hold.
Exactly.
100%. They're
And
incongruent.
They are congruent.
They are congruent.
They are in alignment. That's a homeostatic balance.
Yes.
But that system wants to come in and cut out the tonsils, the adenoids, make it bigger, and then it's what I call giving an 8-cylinder engine to a 3-cylinder car. Your frame doesn't match your power now. You don't have the ability to run that much space. So what are you going to do? You're going to collapse. They call it relapse in the industry, but it's collapse, right? So we create a system that's going to collapse from the collapse that created the system. Somebody make it make sense.
Well, that's
the
why
math ain't mathin'.
It's why it's a perfect business model.
It's a
because
great business model.
It's never just the one. It's then you have the next and the next and the next, and it's like a hamster wheel of, okay, what are we going to cut out next or put in next?
Right.
And oftentimes the marketing model is fear, right? You want this, then you need to do this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, all of these bad things.
Yep.
But the morality there is interesting to me too, because we've talked about this in other courses and things, but across the world, palates look different, bites look different, airways potentially have different millimeter sizing. So we're talking the Western context is really interesting.
Yeah.
When we're zooming in and focusing so much right here, and we're not being like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
What else? What is the possibility of a human body? What is the possibility of breastfeeding?
You and I have seen this happen. I mean, I recall one story where you and I were on a different island, and we were working with a family that the baby wouldn't latch. Baby was like 10 days old or something. And for the mother's sake, did the exam, blah, blah, blah. And it's between the mom and the babe.
Totally.
Right. And so I'm like,
We could all feel it.
I'm like, okay, I'm in one of those moments where I'm like, okay, bleep, but I'm just going to like fly the freak flag here. And I said, okay, date of birth, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay. And I asked the mom, I said, what do you want? What do you want in life? She was like, I really didn't even want a boy. And
She's like, I just want a garden.
I just want a garden. I just want a farm.
Whoa.
And I'm like, okay. So, I kind of did my stuff with the baby and the mom. And I'm like, this baby is here to help you do that.
Get your garden.
He's a blah, blah, blah. This is his archetype. This is why he's here. And she lost it.
Oh, it gives me chills thinking about it. It was such a
And
magical moment.
put the baby back to the breast. I don't think they glitched ever since
Never.
then. That was it.
Wow.
We've seen them. I've seen them twice.
My
2
goodness.
times I've been back over there. Like driving. One time I stopped at another little place, and they get out of the truck and they're like,
Oh my gosh.
yeah. And he's like a year and a half old.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful boy.
Yeah.
Breastfeeding exclusively
Absolutely.
still, like
Wow.
just doing his thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There was nothing after that.
Yeah.
It was like a full integration moment for her.
Absolutely. And those moments where the gift is camouflaged by this problem.
Yes. When really it could be your greatest opportunity.
This is your opportunity.
And I think that also speaks to the resourcing piece. If you're in a low resource state, like all you're going to see potentially is problems.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And then
Yes.
you have people around you that are like, I have a solution.
Yeah.
You have the nail, I have the hammer.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Oh yeah, totally. They've got you.
And also, once again, resonance with who is your community at that point, because it might be something that is very resonant in the field for motherhood, and so being able to look at that of like, oh, we're all kind of doing it this way.
Yeah.
Can I do it a different way?
Yeah. The really fascinating thing to me is to watch this shift with, like I said, some of these really gifted orthodontists who guided the craniofacial world, 30 years ago, and they're watching the downside of the bell curve, on this side, and I'm like, oh, this is so fascinating, because what they're seeing now is that the airway that's congruent for that child's capacity is the one that is their design. That's their design. And what we've seen in the rooted family space, and I've been seeing for the last 10 years, is that when you dial in all the other parts and pieces of your life that make you human, then that creates capacity. And then what happens is things begin to open up and you find what's yours. And it happens and it shows up. I mean, you've seen the photos and even the women in your nutritional space, like the way that their lips change and the way that their eyes change and just the brightness and openness and the softness and the bone begins to heal and express, and all of the genetics begin to really show up, like the fine tuning of it. You know, it's the instrument, right? And it's just
100%.
coming online and it's really beautiful. And it doesn't look like your ancestors from the tribe that you're from. It looks like you. And it breathes well and it moves well and it's happy and it's beautiful and all of those things. And it doesn't have to be 42 millimeters, right? We had an interesting thing come up with Kua and a tooth rotation. And parents lose their minds a lot of times when the lower teeth will start to come in and they're rotated. You know, and everyone in a Facebook support group is going to go, that's a tongue tie. It has to be released and blah, 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 blah. And, you know, now we've got enough history there to where people will come in and say, yeah, we've already done that though. And I'm like, yes, yes.
They're like,
They're like, now what?
And
Yep.
so you came to me and you said, okay, we've got this tooth and now we've got this rotation.
Yeah. Well, I was noticing, so his 2 teeth were in, and then his top 2 teeth, his 2 bottom and his top 2 teeth were coming in. And it also at this time, I'm going through all these like pictures of ancestry for another project that I have going on. And I'm like, like my grandma has this tooth rotation. And then what, my mom's childhood photo.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, my photo, mine. And I was like having a moment and I was like, oh, okay. What am I going to make this mean? What does this mean to me?
So you send them all to me.
Yeah, I said, I don't know. Okay, this is on like day 4 or 5 after sitting with it. Okay, I didn't go right away. Anyways, so I'm like,
That was her saying, I waited 4 days.
Yeah.
And then I sent it all to Michelle.
And I did. I sat with it and I was like, okay, this is a really interesting pattern. Cool. I'm recognizing this pattern. I was in orthodontics. This is not something that I necessarily would like desire for Kua to go through the orthodontic process. And I would love to do this all like energetically and leak in the family ecology and cleaning up our leaks. And so I present this to Michelle. I'm like, what do you think about this pattern with all these pictures? And then I sent a picture of Kua and I was like, isn't this so fascinating? And she's like, yes.
God, Molly being
I
so
have-
subtle.
So subtle. You know what? My design is different. I'm more like role model networker. This is living my design. I'm using my network. And so she's like, I do have thoughts. Next time we're in person, we'll discuss. I'm like, no, but
You're like, do you want to go to the beach tonight?
Yeah, exactly.
Fine. Why do I have to wait? I don't want to wait.
So we were chit chatting, and the information that Michelle offered me was very in line with my belief system and the congruence within our family dynamic and how we want to how I want to mother Kua and how we want to hold him, what frame we want to hold him in. And within 6 days,
It derotated.
derotated.
Wow.
His tooth. And here and there, I do witness like a little bit of movement within that tooth specifically.
They're supposed to move,
Okay.
right? The teeth are supposed to move.
Yeah.
And the rotations and, you know, the upper lower jaw relationship all has a very energetic blueprint.
Totally.
Yeah, that's connected to your lineage, your ancestry, your resourcing, your environment, all of your ecology.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the energetic piece, like that me sealing, just the recognition. We've talked about this with mirroring. Sometimes like this piece of like in relationship, it was in relationship to Sam and I and marriage in general and marriage within my lineage,
Yeah.
right? What marriage has represented to my family, my mother line. It was just awareness. It was like, phew. And I was
Sometimes
like,
it's as simple as that. Yeah.
Like you say,
like
zip,
that, like,
zip,
like
zip.
yeah, zip, zip, zip. The story I shared about mirroring in the fact that when I brought to my awareness that I had been unconsciously avoiding my husband, connecting time with my husband by energetically my daughter waking up all the time, just the awareness piece, and for that to create resolution because that's calibration is the awareness of, oh, hi, this exists in me.
Yeah.
Yep. And I recognize it right away.
Sure.
The truth, there was a lot of truth in it. And I fully take responsibility for all of that. And I feel like that awareness and the responsibility, the willingness to take responsibility is the shift for him in that situation. But I also really appreciate the permission that there is a rotational aspect of teeth as they come in. And teeth were designed to move. Bones or teeth are bone, and they're crystalline structures, and they're energetically connected to the negative ions of the earth and the sun.
They hold light.
They hold light. Yes. So I appreciate that permission to just witness his process also, and not being like, I don't know, you need your mom munchie, or like whatever it is, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't even go there with any appliances. I was just like, okay, we're going to watch this. We're going to witness him.
Yeah.
Here, I'm going to hold the energetic field that I know how to hold and let him have his
That's
thing.
part of your frame to hold. And also, you can stand in a way and in a space that says, yes, I see this as my lineage, my line. I've got this. Go ahead, sweetie. Express yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
And
And
thank
in the
you-
most
thank you.
beautiful, loving
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be like a fight or it doesn't have to be any of that. It's just the awareness and knowledge of this is where it stops. We're going to do this.
Totally. And I feel like this has come into our sphere a lot with midline revolution and the whole lip and tongue tie picture.
Yeah.
The restriction, the restrictive quality of the frenums and the tissue in the mouth. And yeah, the resourcing piece is obviously like such a crucial component. The energy, the resourcing in the physical frame, but also the energetics and being aware and being open and being responsive to that
Yeah.
changes your experience.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, and I've had clients that have done this too, where they've been of a certain tribe or ethnicity or of a certain people, lineage, DNA, whatever, and they learn resourcing for them, what it means for them, and then return to the locus of their ancestry and their people, and literally their bone structure will start to change. They'll get sharper in places, more defined in places. I mean, it is amazing just being back in the field of their people. Their face will change. It's safe to look like them. It's good to be that person in that environment, and the body just responds.
Totally.
Yeah, it's wild to see. And the other thing is, in the state, my I would say core belief is that, and validated, of course, by these fathers of craniofacial growth orthodontics, and as far as like a growth trajectory goes, is that what I came away with after looking at the biggest picture I could find, which was people connected to their land, God, and other, in a location with a purpose, with a heritage, with a way of doing things in the world, that we are sacred geometry on sacred geometry, and the combination of those two things together creates what we look like. It's part of how we express who we are, is how the bone grows and how the features develop, right? And I think what we saw, if you layered it, like I said in the last episode, if you layer it vertically with what Weston A. Price didn't talk about, what was happening in politics, what was happening in modernization, civilization, colonization, the degradation of the ways of life that people were held together by, then it's like literally the light leaving their body, which degrades the teeth, degrades the bone, degrades the soul. And it's a soul degradation. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone's going to be affected by that the same. Just like traumatic events in our lives doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to take a trajectory that's outside of us. I think for some people it's more prevalent, And I think that has to do with just capacity and gifting and blueprint and mapping and all of those things that make us uniquely us, right? And at the same time, that can still be a gift as well. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. I think our dualistic perspective in our society is to make something good, bad, right, or wrong. And that's not the case. When I think about the potential of the principles that the biggest picture of what being connected looks like, then I find great hope in that. And when I can bring someone to that and say, this is potentially what's yours. Do you want this? And someone will first take a hold of it with the mind, think that they've done it because they thought about it. We see this all the time.
Yes.
Different than the
Oh, yeah, I
experience
know
of
that
it.
now.
Yep.
I know that. They cerebrally know that thing, but then are willing to pull it all the way through and actually have an experience with it. And what does it look like to turn that up and to mold my environment in a different way that actually gives me feedback in the moment? That is knowledge. That is the path to wisdom, right? But that's the thing, is in our Western minds, we stop because we get information and we think we understand. And so understanding stops the process, but we don't know anything in our bodies yet. And that's where I think a lot of people get stuck, because the allopathic airway dental model is so linear, so logical. It's very appealing to the Western dualistic dichotomized mind. That you're like, of course that's the answer. But I'm like, what about connectedness? And what about homeostasis? And what about the body's ability and the fact that you are still, spinning and expressing and the geometry? This is one of the reasons I love global bowspring so much, is because of the sacred geometrical principles that whole model and algorithm uses, is so empowering to the person, but also anybody that might come to help you in some way, or that you might seek to help you. I can remember back in the day when, shortly after we did our podcast, almost 3 years ago, I mentioned one type of modality, and I think everyone quit listening and went to find that modality.
That's exactly
and the
what happened.
surge just, you're welcome, and no, that's not everything. But I can remember back in the day practicing that modality with other practitioners, and they would let people spin, and I'm thinking, this is wrong. And what I learned is the bowspring anchoring and the way it creates stability through the hands and the feet, the glutes, the hips, the heart, and the head, the heart, the hips, the head, actually stops the spin. Doesn't stop it, but it puts a governor on it. It gives it, it grounds it, so that it can actually move something.
Interesting.
Wow.
So if you just roll it, nothing happens. But if you slow it and you allow it to
Unfurl.
yes,
From the inside out, there's a huge difference.
from the
there.
inside, it's magnanimous. It's huge.
Yep.
And that brings us to the sacred geometry of the unfurling of the embryo, the process of natural vaginal birth, what happens in the cervical spine, the first concussion of the cranium, all the things that are designed to help that system come online, right? That so many things are missing because of that in our process now. And you probably are the same way. You don't even have to tell me how a child was born. You can put the child in your lap. You're like, okay, cesarean, blah, 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 cord wrapped around here, blah, blah, blah. It's all there. It's all in the body. You can feel it. It's palpable.
It's almost so obvious in the way that they have an inability or ability to get into certain planes of motion.
Yes.
And the suppleness of the tissues. Those are the
Yes.
two major qualities
Right.
in their bodies as infants
Right.
that I can pick up on very quickly on the birth indicators of the birth process.
Yeah. And also that's a really strong indicator to me of what their trajectory is,
Yep, where they're going to go.
where they're going to go
if
with
they
it.
if they stay with the path that they're on.
Right. Following the path you're on now,
Yep.
this is your trajectory, right?
Totally.
So you can map it out very quickly. And it's something that you do really well with the growth trajectory process is you're able to like map out for a parent, you do this, like likely
Yep.
here's what you're going to see.
Yeah.
If we go this way, likely this is what you're going to see. This is what you need to dial in to really make a change in the way that you say that you're desiring.
Same thing we did with Koa recently.
Yeah, this has been it's been so cool as an experience for me to have. I have one child who was born C-section, second child born at home. And so 2 different body presentations, 2 different blueprints, and then 2 different ways that we have relationally come in contact with how they like their body to be moved.
Yeah. And just, like Koa's one that doesn't like to be touched. Granted, don't blame him at all. And he had a very specific shoulder pattern that went with his birth story.
Yes.
I could see it. And so we finally got to the point where he was resourced enough to, like, on his own volition, because that was really important, is getting him to the point where on his own volition, he could begin to correct his patterns. Right?
Totally.
And you'd been modeling because you'd been in the floor regularly, and that was safe for him to be able to do that.
Very.
And I came over and we switched some hand positions on some things and worked on some dig drag and I won't go into it, but what released and unleashed in him, I thought you were going to need like medication for about 2 weeks. I was like, I'm concerned for my girl because what's happening right now is a lot.
She was like, sorry. As she was driving away.
Gotta go. And I'd be like,
Let me know how
I'd
it
be like,
goes.
you doing okay? How's it going over there? What's up?
We were like growling. Like it was like,
oh my God, it was so primal.
Because we were just like doing it with him, right? But
It was so primal.
But every body presentation is interconnected with emotions, your body, mind, soul. It's all together. So when you calibrate big pieces, if you're listening and maybe don't know what she's referencing, there's going to be how it goes in is how it goes out, is what Michelle says all the time in bowspring classes, and that's what was happening with Koa. And we were like, thank you.
we're not sure, but this is really hard.
But we really, I felt so centered to be able to be like, yes, like I'm here for the expression that and 3 years ago, it would have been a different story. I felt very capable to be centered.
I feel like that's relevant to put in here is that your entry into this was his original diagnosis.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So almost a full circle moment in a whole different, and you and Kyle in a whole different family ecology, you in your own frame in a totally different way, interacting with Koa.
Yeah.
Potentially working through what could have been coming up in those early days.
100%. Yeah. Diagnosis 5 years ago, and then full circle moment into him being 6.5, going into that, like, he's kind of completing his phase of being in his mother's energetic field. And it's kind of like it feels very cyclical to me.
Rite of passage.
Yeah. Rite of passage. Exactly.
Yeah. He's coming to the end of that. And I know, like, when I'm talking about lip and tongue tie and teaching, I always talk about, like, is it a reason or a response? And is the anatomy the reason for the dysfunction? Is it what's contributing to the dysfunction or the lack of optimal? Or is it a response from the body because the body hasn't fully unfurled and come into its space? Because, we have embryo in the golden mean, right? And so as it grows, it's also growing this way, but also this way, right? So almost like an involution coming out, and then the midline zips up near the end of the gestational period, and then birth happens, and then it continues unfurling, opening, and then up until the time that a child begins to walk, right? And I feel like a lot of what we're seeing in the tongue tie space is this cessation of the unfurling and a cessation of the development from those geometrical sequences that's not taking place. So we've seen it a ton of times. Like I've showed you this like in the very beginning when you and I first worked together, and then also like where we would look at anatomy that people would call posteriorly tongue-tied because it's submucosal and all of that. And I taught you guys from the very beginning, you do not cut that. Yep. Do not cut that.
Don't touch it. Don't
touch it. Don't change it. Let's get the body online. Let's get the unfurling more. Get the baby engaged, and then the anatomy will change like that.
And I think that's something like very, very, very relevant to point out again is that the anatomy can change in the mouth. The mouth anatomy will and can change with the right parameters of movement, activation, and space created in the physical body.
It's all nervous system responsive tissue.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and a lot of practitioners will address it as nervous system responsive tissue through reflex integration, modalities, things like that. I call that Hotel California. You can check in, but you can check out, but you can never leave, because if you do not resource and you do not power up from all of the metabolic foundational ways,
Creation, utilization,
and maintenance, then you are going to keep serving that system. It's like jump starting a car every time you want to run it, or if there's a traumatic event after you're integrated, you disintegrate again, and then you don't know how to pull the whole system back online again. So I have some really strong opinions about that. I feel like that the resourcing doesn't need to come necessarily from the modality. It comes from the ecology and bringing these developmental pieces online through the unfurling, the geometry, the resourcing, the family, all of that. And then you say what remains, and then you add if necessary. So that's, to me, the sequence that you want to follow.
And just with the ecological piece, I love that you said nervous system responsive tissue, because if we look at that ecologically, mom, how are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you doing? I don't know if I know of a
know
scenario
of
where
one mother that is like, I'm going to say okay,
Yeah.
with a 3-day-old, 5-day-old
They're not.
infant going
Primally,
into
they
a
shouldn't
procedure.
be. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
And hearing them scream.
Yeah.
Totally.
I mean, I don't mean that like they can't have it. I mean, it's like, you don't leave them alone. You don't,
Totally.
there's
It's
a whole,
against your natural biological
yes.
laws.
everything,
Yes.
evolutionary protection. So,
And also on the flip of what mothers are creating as an opportunity is when moms are dialing in their own nervous system. Sorry, how is my kid's tissue and body changing in front of my eyes without me
doing something.
Doing
Right.
something. Yes,
Right.
exactly. And when I consider, because I'll and we all get these questions, but when a mother does find herself in, man, I just don't know what to do. It's like it's everything is compressed into is this my only option? Because I'm afraid of what's going to go wrong if I don't do this. There's a direct correlation between how mom is feeling in her nervous system and how rigid and wound up and what was the word you were using earlier? Restrictive. It's the restrictive quality. When even
is
the phrase
interesting.
restrictive quality.
How this is restrictive.
Yes,
If
exactly.
That's the quality of the mother's tissue as well.
Exactly.
in my summation, most of the time this tissue is compressed and dehydrated.
Yeah.
There's a lack of exclusion zone hydration present, and that's where the EMF picture comes in. But it's also demonstrative of poor mitochondrial function and poor metabolic baseline.
Totally.
These kids are not online metabolically and mitochondrially.
It starts from prenatal.
Prenatal. Yeah.
Or even preconception.
Exactly. And it's dehydrated, it's involuted, it's underdeveloped. And that, to me, before someone goes into a surgery, is the most important thing to address. And this is what we talk about in generative biohabits, is how to bring all of that online and give a child the best opportunity to functionally begin to use that tissue, those muscles, all of that nervous system organizational equipment that they're born with, the biological drive and need to show the well-known Jennifer Tao says, competency in the world. That's how they demonstrate that. And that's what we're here to support. Unfortunately, a lot of times a baby will end up with a surgery that's not actually, they're not prepared for, and that they collapse from afterwards. And they're not set on the trajectory for expansion and openness to engage with that process after a surgery.
Yeah, and my heart actually goes out to modern day mothers, because I do not think, when we're talking about the greater ecology of the industrial age or the technology age or Western living, nuclear family, Western living across the states, there's not a structure set up for them to bring in some of these pieces that we're talking about in an easeful way. Right. So you almost have to go against the grain. Totally. In many microclimates and microcultures, you may be going against the grain, and that can be difficult to get started. It can be difficult to get that ball rolling down the hill, you have to push it, you have to push the boulder a little bit to get it going. But then once it takes off, you and your children are going to exude vitality. You're not going to have these diagnoses. You may be going into other areas, more energetic, more spiritual pieces, instead of going into the allopathic model and needing a surgery and outsourcing. So right. I feel like that is also, just important, I guess, to note that you may be going against everything that you've been raised in. Yeah. And you may have to move, or you may have to change your community. There may be what is a seeming sacrifice for this kind of, I want to say a drastic change, but if you really want what you say you want, which most women want the best for their children, most mothers want the best for your children. If you really say that you want that, what are you willing to become? What are you willing to do? And I think some of these pieces, it's just not always easy. It's not always easeful at the beginning. Right. And it becomes easeful once you flex that muscle.
And I find that when asked the simple question, what is in alignment for you? They already know the answer, and that already is the path forward. It's just a matter of how do we want to bump up against what we don't want, in which case a lot of moms learn this literally through the child diagnosis route. This is like a whole thing of how women learn. And I was doing it in my own ways with COA and health diagnostic kind of things in the beginning of my journey, and being like, whoa, hold on a second. Okay, this is actually what I want, and we're gonna go create this with our family. And so the what you're giving and taking, and what's on the other side is probably what's in your heart in the first place.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that we see this a lot in Rooted Families. So Rooted Families is the course that Kori and Kyle and I created, that Kori and Kyle are now leading families back through in a second year. And overwhelmingly the feedback is, I did this a year ago and I'm just now getting it. Yeah. They're like, oh, I did this with my mind. Yes. I did this looking, a lot of times they're looking for confirmation bias, or they're looking for familiar language. So they show up and they think they're going to learn something about the airway or something, and they're not hearing anything that sounds familiar with that whole linear line of conversation. And they're like, what? And then I'm asking them to have experiences with things and try things and look for feedback in their children. And they're actually looking at their children's behavior as communication. And they're like, what is happening right now? It's a overhaul. It's just a massive overhaul. And then a lot of times, another thing that I've seen is people look at what is happening with their children and they're like, I don't even believe this is happening right now. Yes. What is happening right now?
Yes. I think the beautiful thing about the containment that you guys have created, though, is once you witness the possibility, more possibilities become available in your field. Exactly. You start seeing it, you're like, oh my gosh, I actually witnessed this in my child. And then it becomes more of a thing for you and your family.
You can actually hold more what you considered impossible as possible.
Yeah. And if you had the chat about belief systems in the last episode, and if you're hearing this and in your belief systems right now, it sounds crazy, scary, and something non-resonant, to know that you can create shifts in your children through your own embodiment, your own journey, then trust that for now. And
absolutely.
then trust
Absolutely
that.
trust that.
We've seen it
Don't
all.
argue.
We've seen it all as far as like it's either going to resonate in this season. It might resonate 6 months from now.
Yep.
It will resonate when it's supposed to resonate.
Yeah.
And trust your journey while you're on your journey now. And also, I just love the opportunity to share openly about what our real life experiences have been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So-
I feel like this is basically lived out the message in Science is a Revolution. It's Thomas Kuhn. I'll have to get that book, but he wrote it in the 60s, University of Chicago. But it was basically philosophy of science. And he talks about scientific revolutions and paradigm shifts. And we are actually, if you've read that book, I read that book in like freshman psychology in nursing school or something. And one of the things he said in that book is he talked about the sunset. He's like, you've got the astronomer, the scientist, the artist, the songwriter, the sculptor, the painter, all of these people who witness the sunset. And they all interpret it through their lens. And none of them are wrong. There's not a right and there's not a wrong. And that impressed me so much because now after reading that book and I'm watching the flow of this whole like airway paradigm over the last 15 or 20 years, I'm like, we're coming to a shift. There's a point where something's got to shift. And 10 years ago, I said this whole like laser tongue tie release thing is going to be out of control, like out of control. Like there's actually going to be less ways to actually get a really good outcome from people because it's going to be so overblown. And now, and the expansion orthodontics route is very similar. And now I feel like, okay, if somebody's going to pioneer a way to do like what Ray Pete and Kori have done in the nutritional sphere and say, look, this is the way that you measure for yourself efficacy in the choices that you're making. If I can do that and I can bring that to the world, then my mission is complete.
Wow.
I'm good. That's what I want. I want people to be that empowered and that aware of what they have in their creative potential just by the God-given design of their bodies, nature, the world, because we have evidence that it's happened before and we're not screwed and it's not over and we don't have to lay down and die because there's, toxins and blah, blah, blah. Our bodies can do it. We can do it. We may have to do it differently than our ancestors did it. We will. And we'll figure it out. We can. And we're going to have to make some choices. And we're going to have to be really in tune and in touch with the choices that we make because it's all going to come back in the field to us. Are we listening? Are we paying attention? And we can do it. We can actually make those kinds of differences. I see it over and over and over again. And I feel like it's this kind of understanding and awareness and knowledge and information, but also experience that makes that possible.
Totally. I feel like you're also speaking to kind of like the idea of like a pendulum. Like we've gone really far into this. Everything needs lasered, everything needs expansion, orthodontia, all of that. And then there's going to be the swing back into some type of hopefully balance or harmony. And you coming in with this idea of like, okay, let's set parameters around your way of knowing. How can we use what's around us in this modern way, this ancient future way, right? And what are the parameters of how do you know that you know? Can you come back to the inner knowing? Can you come back to reading the feedback of your environment, of your children? And I feel like you're already setting that legacy. You're already like setting that trajectory for families.
Thanks. Thank you. I appreciate that. I want families to know that they have options and they have power, and that even if they do choose something in the realm of, expansion or whatever, that to be able to set a foundation for their child, to teach your children about their bodies,
Totally.
that
Being in tune with their
yes,
bodies. Yeah.
the way energy moves in place with their body, their own resourcing, how to shorten the distance between knowing what they need and asking for what they need, that kind of thing, and knowing what their options are in that. I feel like that's a really redemptive thing that parents can learn and that children can be a part of in their whole
100%.
system.
100%. And it's already happening with as young as even my kids are. And yeah, just their ability to recognize their own body literacy in that way.
Yes,
Yeah. I love that.
absolutely.
And then something else that you said in the big picture of tongue tie episode that I just think is such a sustained, always applicable, great thing to keep in mind is the concept of there's no rush.
Yes, slow down.
And whatever you've heard, if anybody's told you that there's an emergency, there really isn't an emergency. It's a lens. It's a lens.
Yep.
And you can take on that lens and make it yours, or you can choose something else. And so if this is your permission slip, just from hearing us reflect back to you that you can slow down a little bit,
Yeah.
with decisions, with modalities, then yeah, let it be.
Yeah. I know, it's so interesting. I've had, I think this happened the other day. Someone on one of our inversion reels or something said something like, "Oh, this is so great. I'm going to take this and put it through my PT lens." And I went, "Please don't." I mean, I was just like, let's not put it through our education lens. Let's
Have an experience.
Have an experience with it.
go do your journey and see what you learn and what you have uniquely to bring to the world. Let's not relegate that to our educational, lenses. Yeah. See if we can stay open with that.
So much of the lip and tongue tie industry maps over to the medical obstetric industry. And so I think that's fascinating because we are also seeing the pendulum swing within that medical paradigm as well. So I'm just curious on like, what is the human going to look like? What is the mother going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years? I'm curious about, the trajectory. And, there's spiritual principles that's like only the few carry the collective. So it doesn't have to be everybody switching and moving and going into this way. But the potent consciousness only has to be in a few people to really carry the idea through.
So true.
Yeah. As far as like where I see everything going in the next 5 years, I think that the struggles are still going to be really real for a lot of parents. And, as far as like what to do, like with and for their children, although I do feel like that's softening and becoming clearer, that, and I think we have actually to thank a lot of the dysregulating things that have happened in the last several years to thank for that, is that no one outside of you has your answers. No one outside of you has your answers. They might have something they want you to do. They don't have your answers. Only you have your answers. And, if we can broaden the spectrum and the possibility of options for people just by talking about anthropology and history and things like that, then go have an experience with your lineage. Go have an experience with the bulk of your DNA. See how that feels. I was having a conversation one time with a lady who had traveled the world at a point where it was shortly after Price's journey. So this was probably like in the 50s, I guess. Indigenous languages had been taken away. People were being punished for using the language in various different parts of the world, right? And she commented on the health and well-being of the children, because at that point, a lot of these children were going to either territory schools or religious schools or something other than how they were taught in their culture, 50 years before. And she was commenting on the unhappiness and just the general unhealth and unwellness of the children. And then she said, probably about in the 90s, so 40 years later, she took the journey again, and the language had been restored to the people, or they were no longer persecuted for not speaking their language. And that pretty much gels with in Hawaii when the language came back, yeah? Or they were allowed to have their language back. Or not going to be persecuted for it, I should say. She noticed a palpable vitality in the children that were speaking their native tongue. It's their frequency.
Wow.
They were speaking their frequency, their language, their grandparents' and great-grandparents' language again. And the vitality that returned to their lives was light in their eyes. Wow. It was in their souls and their spirits, and it literally brought that frequency of life back to them. And I'm like, that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Totally. It's so funny because my husband has had an experience similar to this, in the sense that he has, through his ministry, he was visiting a whole bunch of schools around the island, and then learned the Hawaiian language, learned Olelo through university, and then went on to teach that at the immersion schools. And he will tell you the stark difference of children speaking the native language of their ancestry and those that were in some of the other schools here on the island.
Wow.
And he said the vitality is so different.
So different.
The rhythm is so different.
Yes.
The way that they move their bodies is different.
Yep.
So there's something that's that genetic code. He calls it a zip file.
Right.
Like when you say a word, there's a zip file of all of this consciousness, all of these memories, all of this remembrance from their ancestry that comes in by using a simple sentence.
It's in the brain.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the speech and language centers in the brain hold all these different languages, right? And can you imagine even more if it's of
the land?
Yes, the language of the land. So that connection to vitality becomes visible in the body.
Totally.
I've sent so many families to learn of their lineage and to sing songs in the lineage of their people and to feel that and what that feels like and to sit around the fire. My kids used to have fire all the time outside, when they were young. I taught them young and they knew how to manage that. And it was incredibly life-giving to them to eat dinner. We would do the dishes and then they would go outside and start a fire. We would heat at our home anyway, but just to be outside in the cold and to have a fire going, so life-giving. The frequency and the infrared, everything.
I was going to say with the song, because we very much, music is a big piece for us of playing music that is intact with some of our ancestry as well. And also it's interesting because music is such a strong part of my generational family. So it's there both ways. And I've always been interested in seeing the activation of different styles of ancestral music with my kids, like what lights them up, what they want to dance to, what they ask for now, because now they're saying like, may we listen to this? Just always, again, the experimental process. It's all just, it's having an experience with it. Yeah.
I love how kids will inform, but if we're not paying attention, we'll miss it, right? Or we'll discount it, or because it's not, maybe it's not like in our belief systems, or we've blocked that out because of programming, conditioning, then that's that's an opportunity for us to dig into what's serving us and not serving us anymore. Yeah.
100%.
I would say for people that are, they want to know more. I mean, we've done a lot of work in Midline Revolution talking about all of these things related to the 0 to 12-month-olds.
All of that structure will be changing soon, but
Organic movement and things like that. And that structure, that company is taking on a different shape. But our Instagram is there.
totally.
And you can look at it.
There's a lot of resources.
Y'all's
A lot of
Instagram is like
resources.
rich with resources.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. And then, of course, Kori's got the Freely Rooted course, so that women can learn the specifics of how to dial in nutrition and use in real time techniques and assessments to gauge the efficacy of what you're doing. So
Exactly.
that resource is available. And then we've got Rooted Families, which is where I teach the Mile Wild framework, and also give parents language around quality, not quantitative things, a qualitative language and how to look for feedback and how your children are informing you about their vitality. So we've got lots of resources available and ways for you to explore if you feel like that's something that you're drawn to. There are going to be tons of people out there who want to argue the dualistic points of, is it this or is it that, or is it, this and this, or you can't ignore these diagnoses and all of that. And it's all very activating for a lot of people. And that should tell you something too.
Totally.
It's information as well that, maybe it would serve you to actually slow down and resource yourself so that you can,
Create the reality.
back up and take a look at this tapestry of humanity how it's woven together in such a beautiful way.
And building out your family framework. That's one of my favorite things that you teach in the Mile Wild framework is like literally mapping and building out your family framework, value system, belief system, like just all of it. We revisit that and continue to have an experience with it because we evolve and we change. And so we revisit and we go, is this still resonant for us? Yes.
Yeah.
That's the one video Sam and I have watched three-ish times.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah. Love at the center.
Yeah.
It's our design. We're like, so we feel very called to, creating authentically, creating with love.
And I think it's so interesting now how the ancient, the things that somebody like Weston A. Price would have missed because of his training, because of his narrow focus.
The indoctrination piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is now very validated in literature, in science.
The biased science.
Yeah, it's all there now. I was really fascinated recently by a thing that came out about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy, right? So Maslow's hierarchy is actually not a reflection of his experience with the Blackfoot people in Canada.
The hierarchy of needs.
Yes, the hierarchy of needs. That is not actually what he got from that experience with the Blackfoot.
So where did that come from?
Right. It came from basically a group of men who were designing teaching materials for corporate America.
This literally sounds like the exact story of like the food pyramid.
Right.
Like
Yes.
almost you'd map those.
Exactly.
out to each other.
Exactly. Exactly. And so Maslow had an experience with the Blackfoot people, and he wrote about it. And then this group of businessmen took the information, created the hierarchy of needs, and it's taught in every helping profession.
Wow.
Every one of them.
Wow.
And that's not what the Blackfoot were doing. So the Blackfoot philosophy was that everything for your growth and development and for your happiness and for your purpose in the world is here for you. Your responsibility is to bring your best self to it.
So interesting.
It's all available to you when you bring your best, highest, most accessible, level of self to it. And then you do that over and over and over again, and that is how you self-actualize. Wow. And you have all the resources of the tribe there for you. It's not a hierarchy. The responsibility is radical, where you bring
Individual.
yourself
Wow.
to it.
Wow.
And so
So good.
that is what I would leave us with, is that if you want the resources, all you have to do is bring your highest self to it and meet it, because it's all there for you.
And what you will expose in the process is self-limiting belief systems and the things that get in our own ways. But we have an opportunity to actually clear those things.
Massive. Yeah. So I would leave us with that.
I love that.
Yeah. Great conversation. Thanks,
Yeah,
ladies.
100%. We'll see you guys in the next episode.